Good morning, Vinyl Community. I'm here to read out a chapter called The Candyman, Keeping the Rat Pack Ring-a-Ding-Dinging. Yesterday we talked about the Capitol record of Lawrence Schiller interviewing Jack Ruby. I ordered that record. I should be getting it in a few days so I could listen to Jack Ruby's state of mind before he got a visit from Jolly West. So here we go. When I go, J.C. Sabring said, the whole world's going to know about it. He spoke these prophetic words to his employee hairdresser, Larry Geller. It was 1963, shortly after Sabring moved into the Bavarian-style haunted mansion he just acquired. Sabring uttered these intimidations of doom as he proudly showed Geller the bathroom in his 9820 Easton Drive home, where screenwriter and fellow sadomasochist Paul Byrne, as you remember, Paul Byrne was a silent film actor, died of a gunshot wound in the head in 1932 at 9820 Easton Drive, where Sabring bought the house. In 1964, shortly after the hearing, that memorial prognostication, Geller left Sabring employed to enter Elvis Presley's entourage at the keeper of the King's Pompadour and Sideburns. He also became the esoterically inclined singer's spiritual advisor. Geller's mystical bent was what caused him a few years earlier to make notice the ancient Egyptian hieroglyph of the Ankh on the stained glass window of the starkly modernistic salon on Fairfax Boulevard. Intrigued, he walked in. He struck up an immediate rapport with the proprietor of Sabring's International. Soon Geller was applying the Sabring method to his tonsures of the society's barber clients, such as Sinatra and McQueen. Why would Sabring, to all appearances a successful entrepreneur with everything going for him, voice such foreboding years before his intimidation of morality proved to be all accurate? The answer lay behind one of Easton Drive's property's unique design features. When the house was built in the 1920s, Prohibition was still in force. So the bookcase was constructed that swung out to reveal a hidden bar, a personal speakeasy. 40 years later, during Sabring's 5-year residency, booze was long legal again, but the secret chamber still served the current master of the house as an ideal hiding place for the stock of high-grade intoxicants he sold to a select clientele: cocaine, uppers, marijuana, and soon-to-be the illegal hallucinogen lysergic acid dilethamide, LSD. In the book Restless Souls, Patty Tate, that Sharon's sister, recalls seeing the hidden room while looking for ghosts at Sabring's mansion with her sister, Sharon Tate, when she was living with the hairstylist. Sharon, Patty wrote, this is Patty Tate talking. She stopped abruptly behind the full bar of wines and liquors. Her eyes are wide, and she put fingers to her lips. Shh, I will show you the secret. She continues in a German accent, but you must never tell anyone, or I will have to kill you. Verbatim? She presses a secret button below the bar's surface. A hidden door swings open. Wow. Come inside is the key to the kingdom, she says, pulling me through the door. I expect to find a treasure chest full of jewels. Ah, it's just the file boxes and paintings. To your eye, she says, still playing along, but this painting of a flower holds very magical powers. Close your eyes and then make a wish, then close until I say you can open them. No, Sharon didn't present her kid sister with a tab of acid or a spoonful of coke, but a surprisingly birthday party of a puppy. Even those aware of Sabring's illegal side business tend to shy away from believing that the supposedly naive Sharon was fully aware of the event of his criminal operation. But since the secret chamber was very well known in the hidey hole of the Candyman secret drug stash, even by friends less close to the barber than Sharon, it seems likely that she could have been that innocent. Despite his interest in consciousness alteration through psychedelics, Sabring, as befitting his profession for making the famous looking good for more concern with their outer appearances than inner realities, living above his means to protect an image of wealth and luxury, the thrill-seeking hobnob with hoodlums since his adolescence. Even in the early 60s, through his salon was thriving on paper, Sebring struggled to maintain the ritzy lifestyle he favored. In the process, this compulsive risk-taker racked up dangerous debts to the underworld. The double lives bound to collide eventually. When Thomas John Coomer, that's Sebring's real name, reinvented himself as J. Sebring upon leaving the Navy and settling in Los Angeles, his clients and many lovers thought that the charming playboy as a typical jet-set sophisticate. But Sebring, born in Birmingham, Alabama in 1933, started as a Southern boy just like Charlie Manson. A period of middle-class stability in which Coomer got his head for numbers from his accountant father, followed by a period in which he flirted with the dangers of petty crime, surviving in a harsh environment by theft and cunning. The compartmentalized existence Sebring later lived in Los Angeles as a respectable entrepreneur by day and major narcotics pusher by night began when the Coomer family moved to Detroit. Sebring bragged to his closest confidants that despite his staid middle-class Catholic background, young Tommy got his kicks in high school slumming with juvenile delinquents. He managed to stay on the good side of Detroit's brutal street gangs through brains rather than brawn. He was slight and skinny in the world of muscle tough guys. He was especially drawn to the mystique of Detroit's infamous Purple Gang, a mob dedicated to a bootleg liquor during probation. They diverged into extortion, robbery, racehorses, and gambling. Through the gang was dispersed and in decline by the 1950s, Coomer boasted that he was an apprentice to old-time survivors of that homicidal outfit linked to Al Capone and St. Valentine's Day Massacre and the Lindbergh's baby kidnapping. He stayed in touch with these thugs until the end of his short life. Joe Torrenueva, the barber who received the reassuring call from Sebring's gangster client, Charles Barron, after the murders, also recalled for journalist Mary Tannen that Sebring introduced him to some tough customers in Vegas by saying, "These guys are from the Purple Gang in Detroit. Just keep quiet and cut. You'll be okay." As a teenager, Coomer acquired a taste of street drugs long before the 60s made such pleasure de rigueur. The quick study soon picked up the intricacies of the narcotics racket, and a very low man on the mob totem pole, little more than a delivery boy, Tommy Coomer mastered the trade the hard way. The fast-talking white kid branched out to cut his own risky street corner deals with desperate residents of Detroit's colored town. Right from the beginning, he made the mistake the mob disapproved of. It was one thing to sell dope to the colors, but it was strictly taboo for the salesman to get hooked on his own merchandise. But the kid who later named himself after the famous Florida auto race craved the fast life, and nothing sped things up like cocaine. A tendency to throw all caution to the wind went with the high, which meant that he always lived above his means, barely staying ahead of the debts he incurred. Both of these self-destructive habits incurred the recklessness which resulted in his early death. Despite the cash he picked up here and there through his cut-rate ghetto trade, Tommy Coomer said that he spent much of his late adolescence playing hooky with his juvenile delinquent partners in crime. The indifferent students left school at 17 to serve in the armed forces. In 1951, the year that Stephen was born, Uncle Sam needed a cannon fodder for the fight against the commie threat. When the Cold War headed up and erupted into the Korean War, Tommy signed up for a 4-year stint with the Navy to get 3 hot meals a day and some kind of occupational training. It was thanks to the Navy that he preferred the livelihood that would become the better known of the two lucrative professions. In the Far East, he sharpened his scissor skills as a barber, cutting sailors' hair into a regular buzz cut. Within those limitations, he earned a reputation of customers' haircuts tailored to flatter each sailor's face, a skill that became his trademark. Within the faces he flattered were famous men of the movies, music and mobster business. And it was during his Far East service at the moonlighting occupation that really earned him his steady but quickly spent fortune first took off. It's now common knowledge that America's later anti-communist crusade in Vietnam kept its combatants' fighting morale up by turning a blind eye to their massive consumption of narcotics. Many of the Vietnam vets returned to the States with a habit they never kicked. U.S. intelligence got into the profitable act too. CIA involvement in the Golden Triangle drug trade was then well documented. The similar Vietnam is one of the many unknown chapters in the dirty war which history largely forgot. And right in the corner of the illicit trade was Navy barber Coomer. He became a one-man nautical pharmacy. He dispensed marijuana, morphine, and heroin to sailors and troops eager to numb their boredom and fear of combat. So brisk was his custom that he would later confide in his friend, the writer Joe Hyams, that he earned $30,000 to $40,000 in a single year, a salary General MacArthur could only envy. Could that much loose cash change hands between enlisted men during wartime without at least the tacit approval of their superiors? He must wait the possibility that what we know of the military's later see no evil policy in Vietnam, the possible answer of the question may lie in the wholesaler for whom the young barber acquired his goods. Lucky Luciano and Costello Genovese Syndicate held a global monopoly on the dope trade in the 1950s, which stretched as far as the Middle East and the Orient. Since our subject's main source for drugs was he got back to the States, also included some Genovese connections, it's safe to assume that this was the case in Korea as well. Just as Manson's mob links intertwine with the syndicate history, so it with Sebring. Lucky Luciano's friendly relations with the Navy went back to 1941, when the Office of Naval Intelligence and the FBI brokered a deal with the then imprisoned gangster. After Pearl Harbor, the mob in the land of the free suddenly had a mutual enemy in Benito Mussolini, who had wiped out the mafia in Italy and was now at war with the U.S. In order to win his Sicilian stronghold back to the crime-busting Duce II, Luciano agreed to send out the mob-controlled Teamsters to patrol the New York Docklands, a main target of Axis infiltration and German submarine attack. Naval intelligence and the feds also put Luciano drug expertise to work for Allied cause, using his mobsters and hookers to help develop enemy interrogation techniques, making use of marijuana and other drugs. Thanks to Cosa Nostra's collusion with the Allied invasion of Sicily, Luciano was quickly paroled back to his homeland by the grateful Uncle Sam. Having helped Americans defeat fascism for their own pragmatic ends, the mob remained instrumental in battling another mutual foe, the Red Menace. With such connections, it isn't at all unlikely that Luciano's international organization could have pulled a few stings for the enterprising sailor in Korea. Many have wondered if the parolee, Charles Manson, got away with so many flagrant crimes, small and large, after his 1967 release from prison because of some benevolent federal power watching out for him. The Sebrings, even more high-profile, high-profit criminal activities, also remained undisturbed by the authorities in the 1960s, when even penniless hippie on the street was routinely busted by omnipresent narcs. May also have been due to protection or at least strategic tolerance from high places. In the summer of '69, the commercial pursuit of Sebring and many of his associates were an intense object of scrutiny for several government departments, including the Office of Naval Intelligence. If there is as yet unsounded intelligence connection to this case, I suspect that it may have been more due to the long-standing and well-documented connections between the intelligence agencies and the international narcotics trade than any fanciful mind experiments, like MK. At the war's end, Coomer returned to Detroit. There he attended cosmetology school while working at a record store. Sebring's interest in music and his friendships with many of the best-known musicians of his times add some confusion to the picture. One of his musician drug buddies, Rick James, we all know who that is, recalled that Sebring had some pretensions of expanding his company, Sebring International, into a music business. There's no evidence that this ever happened. Within a year, Coomer left Detroit for the promise of California. In the land of starting over again from scratch, he colored his prematurely graying black hair with his own patented product and became the dashing playboy Jay Sebring. His girlfriend, actress Barbara Luna, still a cult favorite today for her 1967 Star Trek appearance, suggested that Coomer needed a flashier name to match his grand ambitions. With some assistance from his family and unknown others, he invested some of his ill-gotten gains into a Hollywood hair salon located at 725 North Fairfax Avenue. I think I met him there when I was a teenager, and I got some Brian Jones pants and a haircut. Another young actress, Melody Patterson, well known for her recent role in the Western comedy show F Troop, was one of several who submitted to the sadist Sebring's desires at the time, as she was screwily the equally promiscuous Dennis Wilson. Nor an uncommon triangle before, as mentioned, Sebring also carried on an affair with Wilson's wife, Carol. According to Patterson, Wilson introduced her to the promising singer-songwriter Charlie Manson, who was also slept with concurrently at the Spahn Ranch. Wilson had a habit of dumping girls he tired of on Manson, just as happened with Carlene Kaffritz. Patterson maintained that Sebring informed her that wealthy grocer Lino LaBianca loaned him money to open his Fairfax salon in its earliest days. When she learned of the murder, she immediately recalled the name coming up in casual conversation. As of this writing, I have not been able to authenticate her claim, but as one of the least sensational links to the suggestive between the Cielo and Waverly crimes, the possibility of some sort of LaBianca financial patronage at the least bears consideration by future researchers. Patterson, as far as the only one of Sebring's many lovers who spoke of his passion for sadistic sex games. Was all these false rumors of the black hood on his battered head at the crime scene so widely believed in Hollywood circles? We've mentioned how Sebring's friend, Sammy Davis Jr., attended a faux satanic-themed party Sebring held in which the hairdresser donned such ominous headgear. Presumably, the same hood turned up again when Sebring lured B-movie actress, pinup model, journalist, animal trainer, and proud party girl Nancy Bunny Bacon to his Easton dungeon. Her Kiss and Tell memoirs, Lipstick and Legends, the scandalous stories of Hollywood's golden era, includes an eye-opening whip and tell tale that foreshadows the Cielo Drive crime scenes, curious stage dressing. Bacon started her eye candy career as a cocktail waitress at the Sands in Vegas, and she equally experienced how Sebring's friends, the Rat Pack, drank, partied, and made love till dawn. She graduated to appearance in such fairs as Sex Kittens Go to College and a gig editing Confidential magazine. While many of the Hollywood's most desirable women discreetly described Sebring's kinks, Bacon's account of the night with Sebring is the most illicit to date. Okay, so this is Nancy Bunny Bacon talking about Jay Sebring's sexual peccadillos. Sebring wore a black silk Japanese robe that stopped where his thighs started. A wide leather belt accentuated his ridiculously small waist. High-heeled black boots hugged with calves and stopped at the knees, standing away from his thin legs. The roll was carefully opened 2 inches from the front. He wore nothing beneath it. He disappeared again, returning this time with a length of rope. Will you let me tie you? He was a small child asking for a treat that he was afraid would be refused. I nodded, and he looped the rope loosely around my wrist, asking, Is it too tight? No, it's all right. I've tried to catch his eyes, but his head was bent, and he fumbled with the slim white rope. Jay, my voice pulled him up, and those dark, questioning eyes were upon me. I don't like pain. I'm not nodding it. I don't put anything down for doing it. It's just not my thing. I understand, he said at length. He looped one end of the rope over the beam, over the fireplace, and tied it, asking if it was too tight. I shook my head and watched as he secured the other rope to another beam on the other side of the fireplace. Was I turned on by this new bizarre scene? I don't know. I only know that I wasn't frightened. Then I trusted him, and I was curious and anxious to see what he would do next. He sank to his knees and ran trembling hands over my thighs, my legs, my leather boots. He was so gentle it felt like a butterfly wing, and I writhed against his hand, wanting it to be harder. But he stopped caressing me and reached for a bottle of perfume. He poured a large amount of the palms of my hands and moved slowly toward me and spread it all over my breast, belly, and thighs. He filled his hands with another fragrance and massaged it into my skin. Again and again, he reached to the coffee table, coming back each time with yet another scent, a cream, a lotion, a liquid, and he spread them over my body, into my transparent blouse, between the chain links of my heavy gold vest, over the draped gold belt, and slithered then down my perfumed and slick legs. A lotion rested like whipped cream on the tops of my boots and glistened like satin on the eerie glow of the flames. It mingled with the perspiration of my body and shone wet and glimmering, and still he did not stop. He caressed and massaged and spread layer upon layer of perfume into my now reeking body. He then took out a hairdresser's plastic bottle with a spray head, and he squirted me all over the warm water. The heat of the water sent the fumes of my nostrils. Please, Jay, it's too much, I pleaded. The odor was reeling my drug-churned head. It's far too hot. I was surprised when he moved quickly and turned from down the flames. Then he stood and surveyed his masterpiece. His eyes were seeing a beauty that only he could see. I was sorry that I was able to share it with him. I could guess I was even envious of his secret world. My wrists had begun to ache, and Jay was suddenly at my side, loosening the ropes and rubbing my wrists and whispering, "Are you all right?" It wasn't bad, was it? It wasn't bad. And he kissed my reddened wrists and smoothed my hair back from my damp face and wiped the perspiration from my forehead. I sank to the floor and asked him why. He lowered his head, and the flames made the dark sweat curled his hair glow auburn. He scooped up a spoonful of cocaine and sniffed it jerkingly. He held it for me and did not answer me. Instead, he said, "Can we do it again as soon as you've rested?" We returned wearing a black satin hood that covered his head and shoulders. Two holes edged into black leather enabled him to see his way into the room. In his hands, he carried a small whip with several thongs of leather, each tipped out with a knot. I began to get frightened. "No, Jay, not the whip," I said. I was helpless. The ropes were loose around my wrists, but tied to the beams of the loops were too small to allow my hands to slip through. "I won't hurt you," he said, and I was shocked by his voice. It was hoarse deep, and his breath came fast from behind the satin folds of his hood. "I won't hurt you, please." His voice was muffled, sounding of pain and unshed tears, and I longed to free my arms and to hold him. "It's all right," I murmured. Then, unaffected by my pleas, I began to sob. Don't, oh God, don't." Jay cried and began tearing the hood from his head and clawing the ropes from my wrists and ankles, freeing me. He kicked the whip away and turned his back and wept. I looked at the thin, stooped shoulders, racked now with the effort of his sobbing. My eyes fell upon the discarded whip, and the next to it there was on the floor, gleaming dully in the dim light, a long carved butcher knife. My heart leaped to my heart, from my breast. He leaned his head in his hands and turned away from him. I don't know if he heard me. I didn't try to be quiet, grabbed my things and fled out that dark house, and I ran grasping for breath, tearing blurs, the stone steps, and my heart beating a wild tattoo against my ribs. And I didn't look back, don't remember and getting into my car, but suddenly I was turning into the bright lit Benedict Canyon, and my legs were sticking to the leather seats of the thick, sticky sweat odor of perfume assaulted by nostrils. and I put my head on the steering wheel and cried like a baby. Along with the hood, we must again wonder what whoever looped the end of the rope over the beam above the fireplace to the corpses of Sebring and Tate at Cielo was so familiar with the hairdresser's fetishes. If there any fire to the persistent smoke suggested that at least some parts of the violent visited on Sebring was payback for his brutal treatment of one or more of Charlie's girls. Bacon's account may provide us with a clue to what message the crime scene was intended to convey. Criminologists speaking of criminal gangs leaving a distinctive signature of a coded message only comprehensible to those they seek to intimidate. It's reasonably certain that the pig smeared on the Cielo door with blood as a direct reference to the political piggy message left at Gary Hinman's house. Far less attention had been paid to the symbolism of the rope attaching to Tate and Sebring, well known to the social set to have engaged in sadomasochistic bondage play. When established in his new Hollywood salon, Sebring charged well-known clients much higher prices for both of the services he provided than the competition. Sebring's status as crimper to the stars came from enthusiastic word of mouth provided by the first superstar celebrity client, Francis Albert Sinatra. The Sinatra seal of approval was worth gold in Hollywood. Sebring was rapidly pressed into severe as court clipper, the cocaine conduit to the Rat Pack and its rodent hanger-ons. From the unshorn and unshod baby boomers rained on their single parade, Sinatra and his circle set the mold for what was cool and dictated what was hep. Jay Sebring became one of their main style consultants. Frankie's crooning comrades, Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr., were the next to let their locks be transformed by Sebring's gifted scissors, with their lobes were soothing by Sebring's chemical smorgasbord. Martin, in particular, became Sebring's foremost cocaine client for nearly a decade, spending a little fortune for the crystalline pick-me-up that made his haircut swing. The mutually beneficial relationship was only threatened in 1968 when a down-market competitor named Charles Manson was able to offer Dino the same quality and quantity for a cheaper price. Manson confirmed to me in 2012 that he sold Martin coke. Again, he spoke cryptically at an early association with the singer back to thugs he knew from the mob-owned racetrack in Wheeling, Virginia. Ironically, but not credibly, he denied knowing that Sebring was also supplying the singer with snow. The murderous Big Bill Elias, the racketeer who owned the racetrack where Manson worked in his youth, was also heavily linked with Detroit's Purple Gang, with whom Sebring cut his criminal teeth. As far as I've been able to determine, the crucial career-igniting connection to Sinatra was made through the syndicate's favorite singer-crooner colleague, Vic Damone. So impressed with Sebring's skills was Damone that he jetted the barber to the Sands Hotel in Vegas to cut his hair for a performance. Through the bona fides of Sinatra's paisano, Damone, Sebring swiftly entered the Rat Pack's inner sanctum at the Sands. There he garnered another more dangerous customer, the hotel's homicidal hood greeter, Charles Barron. Sebring freely admitted he'd already been initiated in the ways of the underworld by veterans of the Purple Gang in Detroit. It was in Vegas that the hairstylist Persilius' fascination with the mob mystique took fully poisonous flower. Sinatra's lifelong links to the highest level of the mafia have been so widely reported on, there's no need to repeat it here. I'm lesser known Damone, like so many Italian American singers of his time, was also in the mob's thrall. These organized crime connections are not only relevant to Damone's patronage of Sebring, but interact significantly in a manner previously unreported with other players in this dark drama. As a young man, the heartthrob singer, born Vito Farinola, before he adopted the more marquee-friendly Damone moniker, was engaged in the local Don's daughter, who was described as a mafia princess. When Damone broke up with the girl, her mob papa, leader papa, was outraged. The thug dangled him from a 14th floor of the New York hotel. Damone owed his life to the personal intercession of boss of bosses, Frank Costello, who settled the dispute. Naturally, this life saving favor made Damone the property of the Luciano family from then on. So Costello owned Vic Damone. Naturally, this life saving favor made Damone the property of the Luciano family from now on. The servitude Costello's gracious gesture obliged was more than abstract. Despite the riches his record and concerts brought Damone, the mob took a brutal 80% of the singer's lifetime earnings. This Costello, the racketeer who Manson always gratefully acknowledged as his doorway to the underworld elite, owned the man who brought Sebring into show business circles. On yet another ominous occasion, it was another Frank named Sinatra who saved Damone's life from syndicate violence. A mob bookie pressured Damone to pay him protection money for a Las Vegas restaurant he owned. Damone refused. Sinatra met with the enforcer and flashed the singer a secret sign that indicated no negotiation was possible. Sinatra urged Damone to pay up or else. Among Sebring's partner, many other mob associates, the most relevant to the case is an episode that brings Damone directly into the domain of Robert Evans, Sidney Korshak, and even Vincent Bugliosi. This incident also tends to confirm that Manson's many statements about how the entertainment industry is engaged with during the late 60s was firmly under mob control. They also support his frequently voiced claim that one of the many criminal operations covered up in the Tate LaBianca affair was somehow the mob and Paramount Studios, Polanski's employer, were in bed together. When Polanski and Sebring's friend, Paramount chief Robert Evans, was preparing The Godfather, he romanticized tribute to the mafia. It was the invisible but irresistible assistance of Sidney Korshak. The first fixer made sure the real mafia wouldn't put a spinner in the works. The film's producer, Al Ruddy, offered the part of the Sinatra-esque singer Johnny Fontaine, his own, who owes his career to the mob, to another Italian-American singer, Al Martino, who had his own long-standing syndicate ties. Sinatra himself turned the part based on him down, wary to stirring up more rumors about his racketeer chums. However, director Francis Ford Coppola offered the plum part to Vic Damone instead. In an incident that could have come right from the Godfather script, Martino called in some of his favorite favors to the East Coast mob to assure that Ruddy's promise to give him the Fontaine role was honored. There was no horse's head, but I had ammunition, said Martino. Coppola said he didn't want me in the movie. I thought I couldn't cut the mustard. I had to step on some toes to get the people to realize I was in the effing movie. I went to The Godfather, Russ Bufalino. Without Bufalino's approval, the film would not be allowed to shoot in the location of the Big Apple. When Bufalino stepped up, pressure from Coppola begrudgingly relented to give Martino the part instead of Damone. This angered Frank Sinatra, who threatened to destroy Martino's career. Martino called in Chicago boss Sam Giancana to stop old Blue Eyes from seeing red. I learned something doubly troubling related to Martino. In 2013, I asked Charlie if he could buttress his oft-intoned but vague claim that Bugliosi's strenuous efforts to protect underworld secrets was carried out at the behest of the East Coast mob. I asked him why he was so sure. If someone's dead set on getting me killed, Charlie said, I'm going to do everything I can to find out who he's working for. There ain't nothing happening, but nowhere you can find out where I am. I'm telling you, he had to do that. The Pope told him, or he had to be the one telling, going back to the graveyard, or do or die, and there it is. the Pope was Charlie's all-purpose name for the mob. I didn't know what to make of this gnomic statement since he wouldn't provide specifics. Shortly after Pelosi's death in 2015, one of his class-dying girlfriends agreed to open up to me about her ex. She told me she was introduced to the philandering lawyer by none other than Al Martino, who she enjoyed a brief affair with after meeting him at a Vegas nightclub during her stint as a cocktail lounge singer at the hotel. She eventually broke off a relationship with Bugliosi as she accused of being obviously jealous and intrusive. Martino defended his friend by telling her that the bug, meaning Bugliosi, was under a lot of strain because he was blackmailed by the mob who learned of an unnamed but embarrassing indiscretion they held over his head. They offered to keep it hush-hush in exchange for his services. Bugliosi's ex didn't know if hiding the organized crime background of Tate LaBianca, let alone the Kennedy assassination, was part of the deal. Unfortunately, Martino didn't tell her name of the organized crime figure who brokered the deal with Bugliosi. I also learned that Justice Bugliosi had worked on Helter Skelter as a guest of Hefner's at the Playboy Mansion. He also accepted the hospitality of Al Martino. The mobbed-up singer put a DA up to his Beverly Hills guest house when Bugliosi was polishing the Book of Lies. According to the Martino's daughter, Allison, Mario Puzo, author of The Godfather, who's Steve got some of those people work at Creative Casting. Mario Puzo's author of The Godfather also stayed there at Al Martino's house. The Rat Pack member, Joey Bishop, another Sebring client who Terry Melcher approached in '69 about having Charlie as a musical guest on his talk show, is one of Martino's best friends. One of Sebring's invocations was the then unheard of notion that shampoo for men. The now wrinkle in hair care would inspire the title of his well-tonsured friend Warren Beatty's fond movie memorable to Sebring many years later. Sebring made a niche for himself by recognizing the male vanity would be as lucrative as the distaff variety. Marketing a pioneering form of proto-metrosexuality to his macho clients, Sebring sold his haircuts as a form of custom-made artwork and status symbol worth paying astronomical sums for. He also became a father confessor and keeper of the secrets told to him in confidence by the swollen stars' egos he flattered in his salon. But another bad habit Sebring couldn't kick was his indulgence in the unfavorable Hollywood sin of speaking too liberally of what he learned from his clients. Maybe it was all that cocaine that got him talking. In '69, when the high-placed friends feared the not wholly unexpected news that Sebring's fast life had crashed in a bloody pileup in Benedict Canyon, many of them wrongly suspected that it must have been the big mouth that did him in. For Sebring, his own demise would be obfuscated by the post-mortem cover-up, was privy to some of the deeply buried truths into the two of Hollywood's shadiest suicides, the suspicious demise of Marilyn Monroe and the not-so-far less remembered passage of Hollywood screenwriter Paul Byrne, where Sebring used to live in his house with a secret hideaway. While Sebring was living in high life in Hollywood, Charlie Manson in Terminal Island was getting an earful of the same kind of mafia gossip about sexual blackmail and skullduggery in high places from his friend Alvin Karpis. Between chords, progressions, Alvin Karpis taught Charlie guitar. Between chord progressions, old Creepy told little Charlie about mafia knowledge of his old advisory, J. Edgar Hoover, sucking everyone's dick in Hollywood. Karpis and Sebring shared the same Genovese grapevine. These are the kind of secrets that Frank and the Hans Costello once used to keep the powerful politicians he paid often in line. While riding through Dallas on November 22, 1963, Sebring's most powerful client suddenly suffered a bad hair day. Not even Jay's magic blow dryer could repair. A lot of Sabring's friends ended up getting shot in the back of the head. It's one of the drawbacks of betraying the mob. That's the end of that chapter. I hope you learned about the relationship between all these people, man. The next chapter is called The Famous Mobsters in Filmland, which apparently they're everywhere. So we say thanks to Nick and Charlie for all this wonderful writing about the truth in Hollywood. We pray for the vinyl community members, the crime scene members. And when I get the controversy album from Schiller, that is the interview with Jack Ruby, I'm sure I'll be listening to it, trying to figure out what his state of mind was at that time, because I'm sure it was before he met Jolly West. And I might even play it, and I might even get a partial strike. So we pray for peace and end this stream now. Have a good day.